To introduce, I'm doing actually a slideshow, which is on the history of the Sankirtan movement. It's called Voyage to the West, how and why the Hare Krishna movement came to America. Hang on for a second. Sankirtan Das, and I'm a resident here in Vrindavan. I've been here for 40 years now. My wife and I came in 1976. We're old New Yorkers. I used to live in the East Village, actually where Prabhupada opened up his original storefront in 1966. I only lived a few blocks away. Part of the East Village consists of the Alphabet City. Alphabet City is known as Avenue A and Avenue B, Avenue C and Avenue D. It's really far to the east of the East Village, but it's all in walking distance. Tompkins Square Park was nearby, and also Prabhupada's center. I had not much of an interest in spiritual life at that time. I was just a hippie. A friend of mine from college, I went to college in City College, division on Staten Island, and a friend of mine said to me, you know, I heard there's this new yoga group that that has a center in the village, not too far from where you live. Can you get me some literature? They're on 26 2nd Avenue. So I went there, not for myself, but just to get some whatever literature they had at the time, to bring it to my friend. And then I was majoring in filmmaking and in theater in college. At that time also, my wife and I met. She was majoring in sociology. So for one of my film courses, I had to do a documentary. And so I thought, well, let me do this documentary on these colorful people that live in the neighborhood over there in the village, the Hare Krishnas. So I started following them around, and I did a documentary on them. They got a very good mark in my film class. And my wife, she decided to join me, and she did a paper for her sociology class about this Hare Krishna phenomena. So that was our original exposure to the movement. Come in, please come in, Hare Krishna. So our original exposure, this is back in 1960, I lived in the East Village from 67 and 68 into 69. And so they started out on 26 2nd Avenue. But as they grew, they moved a couple of blocks further away on 61 2nd Avenue. And finally, they moved to Brooklyn. Hare Krishna, please come. I'm just going to start our slideshow. Actually, this slideshow that I've just developed, I put it together about, I started thinking about it 2 years ago, around this time, after the Festival of Inspiration 2 years ago, and I wanted to do something for the 50th anniversary of Prabhupada's arrival in America. And I put together this slideshow because I have a lot of contacts in the colleges and in other resources in various places. So I thought that I could put together a slideshow and present it. I especially made it for a college audience. And I especially designed it in such a way where it would fit into a religion class and into a sociology class and also what is called cultural anthropology. So those three fields. Cultural anthropology is dealing with stories about people's different cultures. Joseph Campbell, he was a cultural anthropologist. And so I put this show together. It took me almost 2 months to do all of the research and to get all of the slides together. I have about 120, 130 slides. And then I also, after I got all of the slides together and then all of the research, I really had to shape it because there was a lot of material there. And I had to shape it in such a way that it would be comprehensible to people with no background into this whatsoever. And when I started showing it in the colleges, surprisingly enough, I've been going to college programs, doing college preaching for many, many years. But when I started to show the slideshow, one unusual thing happened. Kids were actually, the students, actually started to ask more questions than when I would normally visit a classroom and just give a lecture. Kids, they were holding back. They didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to ask any questions. But then when I showed the slideshow, it kind of brought out their inquisitiveness and their interest and their curiosity. And they were really kind of fascinated about the history. So I take the history back 500 years. Anyways, let me begin the slideshow. The show itself is about 35 minutes or so. Did anybody have any questions before I began the slideshow? But one thing that I wanted to mention, like I said earlier, my background is both in theater and in filmmaking. And so over the years, when I joined the movement, my wife and I joined together. We met in college and we got involved in Krishna consciousness together. And then I decided to give up all my attachments, like my interest in theater and my interest in creativity and cinema. So my wife and I, we decided to become just completely surrendered. We were living at that time, we moved from New York City because it was so congested. And we moved to Madison, Wisconsin. First, we went up to Nova Scotia and stayed there. In those days, you couldn't buy beads from the temple. They didn't have beads. You have to go to a hobby shop. And at the hobby shop, then you could buy beads. And then you would have to string the beads together yourself in a hobby shop after purchasing the beads and the string at the hobby shop. So we were on our way to Nova Scotia, and we bought some beads, and we bought some string. And there's one of the people that we knew up in Nova Scotia, he was renting a cabin overlooking the Atlantic Ocean down a 5-mile dirt road. And so just before we were coming up there, this is in 1970 or 71, and we call him up. We said, we're going to be coming up in a few days. And he says, oh, you know, there's a new album out by George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. Can you get a copy for me and bring it up with you? And so we went and got the album, and we brought it up. And then when we were listening to one of the selections on the album called My Sweet Lord, and on that selection, there's the Hare Krishna chanting on the background. And so we were really surprised, because here we bought the prayer beads and we were going to string them. And this gave us an encouragement to, okay, we got the beads, let's string them and let's begin this japa meditation. One of the things the devotees told me is that you don't need anything else. That you don't need to know any other prayers, you don't need to know anything. Just chant Hare Krishna. And so that's been my policy for most of my life, actually. I'm not learning many devotees know all of these different slokas and these different prayers. I said, well, the devotees, they told me all I need to know is this one prayer. Let me just stick to that. And so we started chanting up in Nova Scotia. But after some months, our money was running out. And I was invited to go to Madison, Wisconsin. There's a theater group. My background is in theater. So I knew somebody in Madison with the Broome Street Theater. It's still there today. And they invited me, why don't you come to Madison, Wisconsin and join our theater group? And so my wife and I, we were in Nova Scotia, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, and we started a hitchhike through Canada. And we're going first to Montreal. There we stopped at the Montreal Temple for a few days. And then we came to Toronto, and we stopped there. And the devotees in Toronto, they were very excited. They said, Prabhupada is coming to Detroit in just 3 or 4 days. Why don't you wait here, and then you're going in that direction anyways, right? So from Toronto to Detroit is about 4 hours. So I said, well, we thought, yeah, let's just stay. We've been hitchhiking for hours and hours and days. It's very weary to hitchhike. And so we stayed there. Prabhupada was coming on Saturday. And on Friday evening, there was one car getting ready to go. And we packed up our knapsacks. We were traveling with knapsacks. And we went down to the car. And they told us when we got there, it was full. They said, we're sorry, we can't take you. We promised to take you, but we can't take you in this trip. There's another car going Saturday morning. And it'll arrive when Prabhupada, by the time Prabhupada is there. Just go with that car on Saturday morning. Okay, what the heck? So we waited. And then the next morning, we're up early. We came down to the car with our knapsacks. It was full. And they were saying, well, we really can't take you. We can take you, however, if you squeeze in with your knapsacks, then we'll take you to the highway. And from the highway, you've been hitchhiking all across Canada. From the highway, it's only 4 hours to Detroit. So we got into the car. We were holding our knapsacks. We were squeezed in. They finally dropped us off. There we were in the highway. We were thinking, what are we going to do now? We got out the map. We're saying, well, should we really go to Detroit? It's such a big, nasty city. We spent, I grew up in New York City. Who wants to go to another big city? So we were thinking like this, and we got out the map, and we were looking around. Oh, there's Thunder Bay. That sounds like an interesting place to go. Or above the Great Lakes is a place called Sault Ste. Marie. That's above the lakes. There's no other towns near it. So we were thinking, well, maybe we should spend a little time continuing our journey, hitchhiking. But then my wife and I, all of a sudden we started thinking about it. Detroit's not so far away, actually. Maybe we can actually get there before Prabhupada gets there. And so we thought, maybe this is some kind of a test. Krishna, the devotees always were talking about Krishna's testing us. Maybe Krishna is testing us at this very moment. And that this is some kind of a test to see how determined we are to go see Srila Prabhupada. Let's go. And so we made the decision to go. And then as soon as we stuck out our thumb to stop cars on the highway, immediately the very first car stopped and gave us a ride. And they said they're going to Detroit. And so we got to Detroit just within, Prabhupada wasn't there yet. But in those days when Prabhupada was coming to a place, there was a hubbub of activity. So much activity was going on. The devotees were cleaning, and they were painting the walls, and they were doing all sorts of things to get ready for Prabhupada's imminent arrival. Prabhupada was coming. He was already at the airport. His plane had already landed. Then he should be coming imminently. And so we knew how important Srila Prabhupada. We weren't devotees yet. We were outsiders. We were just beginning to do a little chanting. But we knew how important Prabhupada was to the devotees. We also started reading Bhagavad Gita a few months earlier. But as we came there, we saw all of this activity going on. Now there's one devotee, his name is Govardhan. He eventually became the president of the Buffalo Temple. At that time he was the vice president. And he saw that we were just arriving. And we told him we hitchhiked down from Toronto. And he took the time out, he ushered us into the temple, and he brought us prasadam, and he sat down with us and to speak with us. We thought that this was very unusual. We thought, why isn't this devotee? Why is he taking care of us? Why isn't he tending to preparation for Srila Prabhupada's arrival? Because this was so vital for the devotees. And so in any way, we were struck by his kindness and his compassion that he would take care of us rather than tend and to prepare for Prabhupada's arrival. And so this devotee who just took time, a few minutes out of his busy time to take care of us, this made a great impact in our lives to want to also serve the devotees more. And so Prabhupada arrived. We had the great opportunity to see Srila Prabhupada at that time. This movement was just beginning to take off in the early 70s, in 1970 and 71 and 72. But my story actually starts 500 years earlier. And I'm going to, let's see here. So I'm going to sit down, if you'll bear with me, and I'll continue and show you the slideshow. And so this is what I show the students in the colleges. So 500 years ago, in Bengal, in the district of Nadia, there was a great, extraordinary spiritual revolution going on in West Bengal. And the leader of this revolution was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya was an extraordinary personality. He brought people together to create this spiritual revolution. He brought people together from all walks of life, from all castes, from all different sectors in society. And you know, usually over the history shows us, when you think about different revolutions, there's the American Revolution and the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. When you think about these revolutions, they're very violent. People are fighting, people are shooting guns, bombs are being blasted off, and people are being blown to smithereens. But Chaitanya's revolution was not violent. What was his weapon? His main weapon was the Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And so in this way, Chaitanya created a spiritual revival in the hearts of human beings, in the hearts of people in general. He didn't care what religion, what race, what nationality, what ethnic group you were with. Actually, one of his main generals was, one of his main personalities was Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was a Muslim by birth, but Chaitanya designated him as the Namacharya, the master of the chanting of the holy name. And Chaitanya, actually, he even didn't restrict his preaching to human beings. He would go out into the forest and inspire the animals to take up this chanting of the holy name. But you know, like all revolutionaries, usually the revolutionary has to have an adversary. There has to be some obstacle And so that obstacle was in the form of Chankazi. Chankazi was the local Muslim governor, and he forbid the chanting of the holy name. Actually, he had heard people coming to Chankazi to complain, both Hindus and Muslims. Hindus were saying, the caste Hindus, the caste Brahmins, they were saying, this is not our Hindu religion. Chaitanya is giving this out to the public. The holy name is sacred. It should not be given to the public. It should not be given to the common man. The holy name is sacred and should be chanted only in the temples by only the Brahmins. And so in this way, Chankazi, he had heard many complaints. And once he was passing by a house and they were chanting, and he immediately rushed in and he grabbed the drum in anger and he broke the madranga. And he said, this city of Navadvip is under my authority. I never gave anybody permission to chant this Hare Krishna. What is this? Why are you doing so boldly? Who's told you to do this? If I see someone chanting the next time, I'll confiscate all their property and I'll force them to become Muslims. So the devotees were reeling. They didn't know what to do. But when they submitted themselves to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had a wonderful idea. He inaugurated this mass civil disobedience demonstration. You know, nowadays in the 20th century, the civil disobedience, this is known, Mahatma Gandhi, this was his strategy. Also here in America, Martin Luther King, this was his strategy of civil disobedience, massive demonstrations. But here, this is the first instance in history, in recorded history, maybe there's some other time, but this is the first instance in recorded history. This movement of Chaitanya is created a massive civil disobedience demonstration by chanting the holy name. And he went around the different neighborhoods in Mayapur, and more people joined, thousands and thousands of people. And finally they came to the door of Chankazi, the Muslim ruler. And there Chankazi and Chaitanya sat down together and they spoke together. And as Chankazi observed Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he realized that he was in the presence of divinity and that he could not assume to be able to stop this chanting. And Chankazi at that time made a declaration that I will not forbid the chanting ever again. And in the future, that no one in my dynasty should ever stop this Sankirtan movement. And so this was the decree of Chankazi. And in the meantime, Chaitanya, he traveled across India, presenting this teaching to people in all walks of life. The sannyasis, the Mayavadi sannyasis, so many people. The essence of his teaching was Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam kalau nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gatiranyata. That chant the holy name of God, chant the holy name, chant the holy name. In this age of Kali Yuga, there's no other way. Nasteva, 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 no other way. And amongst his intimate disciples, he gave intimate guidance, intimate instructions to this bhakti yoga, to this chanting of the holy name. And also to his intimate disciples, he predicted that the chanting of Hare Krishna would soon spread to every town and to every village all over the world. This is Chaitanya's prediction. Now we jump. 500 years later, the Jaladuta is coming across the Atlantic Ocean. The Jaladuta is run by the captain. His wife is also on this trip, and the crew, and there's one special passenger. And as they're crossing the Atlantic Ocean, actually this special passenger, this elderly gentleman, he has a heart attack. He has 2 heart attacks. He can barely survive. But the water in their crossing the Atlantic becomes very calm and very serene. And the wife of the captain, she's a clairvoyant. She meets with this gentleman, and she assures him that you are a special personality bringing this message of Bhagavad Gita. Surely you will be successful in your mission. And we all know that this special gentleman, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada was living in Vrindavan. Vrindavan, as you know, is a whole area of hundreds of temples. Many, many temples dot the landscape of Vrindavan. And Prabhupada stayed in the Radha Damodar temple. He had a very modest room. He had only 2 little rooms. They're very, very, very small. Prabhupada himself, he was living as a monastic, as a menial servant. He was also working on his translations of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada wanted to bring these books with him to the West. Prabhupada led a contemplative life, and he was praying day and night to be able to follow the instructions of his guru. His guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he met Prabhupada, came to see him in Calcutta in 1922. Prabhupada was still a young man, a student. He was a follower of Mahatma Gandhi and wanted to develop this independence for India. But at that time, Prabhupada came there and offered his respects. And as soon as Bhaktisiddhanta Swami saw Prabhupada, he said, "You're an intelligent young man. Why don't you take this message of Sri Chaitanya and spread it to the foreign countries into English?" Prabhupada was startled. He had never met Bhaktisiddhanta Swami before. This was the very first time. Already Bhaktisiddhanta was giving him an instruction. And Prabhupada actually said, "Well, you know, why would people listen to us? We are under the rule of the British. First, let us break the rule of the British and let India get its independence, and then we can easily spread our culture and our philosophy and our tradition." But Bhaktisiddhanta rejected that idea. He said, "This is so important, it cannot wait. It has to take place as soon as possible." And even just in 1936, just 2 weeks before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati passed away, once again he wrote Srila Prabhupada a letter saying that please present this teaching in the Western world in the English language. Because Bhaktisiddhanta, a few years earlier, he paid for one of his followers. He flew them to England. He financed the trip. And he wanted the people of British people, the people of England. He wanted the people of England to have the opportunity to be exposed to this Krishna tradition. But after a few years, he returned with no luck at all. And so now, Prabhupada, he wanted to somehow follow his teacher's request. He didn't know really how. He waited for many, many years. Bhaktisiddhanta kept showing up in Prabhupada's dreams, encouraging Prabhupada to move on his instructions. Finally, Prabhupada happened to meet a lady who was an owner of a shipping company. that lady gave Prabhupada some donation for his books, to publish the books. Then, in early 1965, Prabhupada once again returned to Mumbai, and he went to the offices of the India Shipping Company. And there he met with the owner of the company, Sumati Morarji. And Prabhupada had a strange request. She thought that Prabhupada was returning to get another donation to continue printing his books. But this time Prabhupada came with an unusual request, that he wanted passage on one of her freighters from Calcutta to New York City. She was a little reluctant to fulfill his request. She said, Swamiji, you're very old. You're going on 70 years old. If you die in a foreign country, actually, when you go to a foreign country, people will not know how to treat us.